Coley Wallace was born on April 5, 1927, in Jacksonville, Florida. At the age of 13, he was forced to leave home because his family feared he might be lynched after an older white woman at the hotel where he worked tried to seduce him. Now living with an aunt in Richmond, Virginia, Wallace played football and wrestled at Maggie Walker High School, but didn't show any exceptional athletic prowess. Joining the Army after graduation, Wallace took up the sport of boxing, winning the Army heavyweight title in 1946 and 1947 at Fort Dix. Upon his discharge, Wallace moved to New York, where he began training at the Salem Crescent Gym, a gym that launched the career of Sugar Ray Robinson. Wallace continued his growth as a fighter, winning the New York Golden Gloves title in 1948 and making it to the finals of the AAU tournament before a hand injury forced him to bow out. In March of that year, he was the star attraction in the Eastern Golden Gloves tournament, where he met future legend Rocky Marciano, then known as Rocco Socko Marciano. Accounts vary of what took place during the bout. Wallace was awarded the decision, but the consensus was that Marciano deserved to win the fight, with reports of fans throwing debris into the ring after the decision was announced in favor of Wallace. Even in the amateurs, there was maybe some skullduggery, Marciano later said of his fight with Wallace. Wallace went on to the Olympic trials where he made it into the semifinals. The New York press called him the most talked-about amateur boxer since Joe Louis, and the comparisons were inevitable as he had a similar look and mannerisms. "They always called me Junior Joe," Wallace said, even when I was fighting in the Golden Gloves. He enrolled in college, studying commercial law at NYU. Wallace then turned professional in March of 1950, training under Bill Miller and eventually coming under the management of mobsters Frankie Carbo and Blinky Palermo. Wallace went undefeated for his first 12 fights, serving notice by stopping the rugged Vern Mitchell in only 3 rounds. However, his momentum stalled after Elkins brothers stopped him in the second round. "I had family problems at the time," Wallace said, "and a lot of other things on my mind. I could have beat him otherwise, and he wouldn't give me a return match." Wallace returned to his winning ways in his next fight, before facing another former amateur star and Rocky Marciano's sparring partner, Aaron Wilson, in back-to-back encounters. In their first match, Wilson was ahead on points until Wallace knocked him down late to secure a decision. 3 months later, they rematched at the St. Nicholas Arena in New York.
Referee Ruby Goldstein, a lot of hot action, and there's the knockdown, square to the chin, and the fight is less than a minute old when Wallace knocks Wilson down, and that count is going up to 8. Wallace weighs 197, Wilson 192. Wallace trying to put him away after that 8-second knockdown. Wilson fighting back gamely. He's not quite so groggy. He's still being battered about the head. Wallace trying to measure him with his left. Shoot that right. Haymakers that Wallace is shooting. He holds his right tucked up under his chin and then bombs with it. Mother, the taller man. Doesn't want to give him room to tee off. Near the end of a very exciting opening round. This is round 2. Coley Wallace in the black trunks is stalking his man. Wilson, however, is not going to be easy to hit. He weathered some of the toughest blows that Wallace could throw at him in that first round, and he came back to hold his own near the end of the round. Once more, he's going to try to bore inside. An upright stance or a short chop to the whiskers. Wallace trying to maneuver him for the finisher. He's got him wobbly and backed into a neutral corner. This man skids away, runs into a right chop to the chin. A little wobbly, but still brave and still moving in. Coley trying to measure him with that radar left. Grazing right. And Wilson is back in again to battle. Step away clean. Great. Wilson leading and moving in. He's not afraid of the bigger boy. Wallace getting ready to bomb. A beautiful right to the chin, and down went Wilson, flat on his face, like a rag doll. Referee Ruby Goldstein starts the count, but the bell rings at the count of 7. Wilson's handlers rush into the ring to take care of their groggy fighter and get him to his corner. And the ringside physician, Dr. Vincent Nardiello, is also going over to Wilson's corner to examine the Alabama boy to see if he's in condition to go on. Doctor is giving his decision. He isn't. And announcer Johnny Addy announces the victory for Coley Wallace.
The bout was Wallace's best performance to date, and critics began to once again talk about his prospects. Manager Blinky Palermo talked of Wallace facing Rocky Marciano within a year. Newspaper accounts show that if you asked boxing fans who was the most likely man to defeat Marciano, the answer would have been Coley Wallace. But in September of 1952, Wallace once again suffered an upset loss, this time against 37-year-old Jimmy Bivens. Wallace was leading on all scorecards until the 9th round when Bivens landed a sneaky right cross that knocked out the favorite. "I made a mistake," Wallace said after, but critics saw the knockout as concrete evidence that he had a weak chin. He was now considered the least likely challenger to take the title from Marciano. In 1953, Wallace went to Hollywood. "I was working out in a Detroit gym one day and Joe Louis walked in," Wallace said. At that time, they were getting ready to make his life story in a movie. Joe saw me, saw how I looked like him, and said that I was the man. Louis and the film director felt that Wallace was perfect for the role, despite never having an acting lesson. "The director just told me to live the part of Joe Louis," Wallace said. "That's what I did." His acting was well received by critics. However, he was shorted payment after the making of the film. "The agreement was that I got $10,000 while making the movie and $10,000 after it was released," Wallace said. "Well, I'm still waiting for that $10,000. Wallace returned to the ring after a 7-month layoff, but was never quite the same. He was stopped by Ezzard Charles in 10 one-sided rounds and was booed after a victory over journeyman Billy Gilliam. One reporter called Wallace a better movie actor than he was a fighter. "The movie didn't do me any good," Wallace later said. "I got to thinking I was Joe and that I was too good when I wasn't enough." Wallace ended his career on a 4-fight losing streak, being decisioned by Bob Baker twice. He took 10 months off from the sport before returning, out of shape, against Bob Woodall, who knocked him out in 10 rounds. Wallace was hospitalized for a concussion after the bout, and one of his sparring partners later revealed that the fighter had lost his ability to take a punch. "There's a leap there, and he couldn't make it," Bert Sugar wrote. "He wasn't a heavy hitter, and he wasn't coming along in a good era. Not like today, when he could beat anybody." After retiring from the ring, odd jobs marked the remainder of his life. He tried his hand at professional wrestling and did even more acting. Wallace became friends with Sammy Davis Jr., who helped him secure a role in the movie A Man Called Adam. Wallace also reprised his role as Joe Louis in Martin Scorsese's Raging Bull. Additionally, he worked as a bouncer, but quit after being stabbed in the back in September of 1964. He briefly worked as a referee and boxing judge, but his scoring was indecisive, as during one fight card, he scored 8 out of 20 rounds, even. Wallace later made a living as a liquor salesman and ended his working life as a barber. On January 30th, 2005, Wallace died from heart failure at the age of 77. Until his final days, he always carried a picture of himself landing a punch on Marciano's nose, a memento from the greatest triumph of his boxing career.